Thank you all. I know this is a busy time of year with the holidays, but I'd be glad to take some questions, and then I would love to say hello to as many of you as I possibly can. But if you have to go to work, go about your business, do some Christmas shopping. Just thank you so much for being here. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask? Yes, ma'am, right there. Please sit down, those of you who want to stay, and I'll be able to call on people. Yes, ma'am.
I'm very concerned about the deficit. And it amazes me that people don't realize that all these things cost money, and how many people don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. But anyway, how would you deal with the deficit with all of the financial needs that we have?
Well, I'm very concerned about the deficit, and I intend to move our country back toward fiscal responsibility. You know, when George Bush became president, he inherited a balanced budget and a surplus, and he squandered it all. And he has undermined our fiscal sovereignty because we are dependent on countries from China to Mexico to borrow money from every single day. You know, the easiest way to sum it up is we borrow money from China to buy oil from the Saudis. That is not a smart policy. So I want to get back to where we were at the end of my husband's administration, where we will have the fiscal discipline to be able to make some of the tough decisions we have to make. Now, there are two things I will do to reverse President Bush's two biggest priorities. His two biggest priorities are tax cuts for the wealthiest of Americans and the war in Iraq. I'm going to get back to a tax system that honors and rewards the middle class and hardworking people, and we're going to ask the wealthiest 1% to get back to the tax rates they had in the 90s. It didn't hurt them, and it helped the country. And then I'm going to end the war in Iraq, so we're going to be able to bring home all that money, $300 million a day. We're going to be able then to reorder our priorities so that we can begin to make investments that will make us richer and safer and stronger and fairer in the future. We have to get back to the kind of budget discipline where you cannot raise spending or cut taxes unless you pay for it, something that has been thrown out the window by the Bush administration. We're going to get back to making sure that we create more jobs here in America. That's the best way to stimulate the economy. And we used to be able to do that, not in ancient history, but in the 90s. We had 22.7 million jobs. You know, sometimes, an opponent of mine will say, well, she talks about the 90s too much. Well, that's because it was the greatest economic era we'd had in decades. More people went to work, more incomes were increasing, more people lifted out of poverty. I think there are some lessons we can learn there, certainly in contrast to what we've seen the last 7 years. During the 90s, the typical family in Iowa actually had an increase of $7,000 in income. The typical family in America in the last 7 years has had a drop of $1,000 in income. During the 90s, healthcare inflation was kept low. In the last 7 years, healthcare costs have doubled. When you look back on the 90s, where oil was $20 a barrel, gas prices weren't bankrupting people. Now, energy costs for an average family have gone up $2,000 in the last 7 years. So I like to talk about what works, because I think we need to get back to doing what works in America and not get diverted by ideology and partisanship. And fiscal responsibility should be a key goal for us. And I'm lucky that I know a lot of people who did it the first time who can help do it again. Somebody said at one of my events a little while ago that it looks like it takes a Clinton to clean up after a Bush when it comes to fiscal responsibility, and I'm ready for the job if that's what it takes.